this is the final in the series for A Country Walk, and we are looking now at the Wishing Well stamp that's in the collection. So you get your Wishing Well stamp and you get sentiments of best wishes, your inner thoughts, get well soon and well done. As I said, it's part of the Country Walk collection. There are other videos here on my YouTube channel covering all the other stamps in the collection. So what we're going to do first then is we are going to stamp out our well, because I want to make a decoupage. So placing our cardstock, I'm just using regular cardstock for this, on our Tim Holtz stamping platform. You could tape it down, you don't have to use the magnets. So removing the protective carrier sheet first, and then we're going to remove the stamp. We're peeling the stamp gently, you know, moving around. You don't want to stretch or distort it. It's a strong polymer anyway, so it's not going to misshape, but just to be certain. So this is going to be the base of our decoupage project, so it's a larger piece of cardstock. So we just press down to pick up the stamp first of all, and then we're going to come in with our Stays On ink pad. This is a solvent based ink pad, so when you're using water based pens it won't smudge. So put a generous amount onto our stamp, working our way around. I've re-inked the stamp. You might have noticed in a couple of other videos it was starting to dry a bit, but you can get refills for the Stays On ink pads. Amazon have 3 in a pack. I think it was $11.99, so check that out. So giving it a good press down to get a good imprint. If I don't get it the first time, the beauty of stamping platform is you can go back and do it again. So I'm happy with that. So go to remove our base. We'll be trimming this later on, so I'm not too worried about the size at the moment. Then what we really need to do is we need to do this 3 times. We're going to have 3 layers. So again, I'm just repeating the process. I don't have to move the stamp because it's going to be in a large area, and I'm going to be trimming away the excess paper around the image as well. So this is imprint number 2. Giving it a good press again. You might want to stand up if your desk is a bit high for doing it when you're sitting down. So there's number 2. And then we're going to need number 3. So for the third imprint, when we cut this down, we're only going to be using the front roof slate section and the front of the stone around the base of the Wishing Well. So again, loading up the ink pad, making sure. I love these Stays On ink pads. Okay, pressing it down, giving it a good press, and there you have it. I want to give another one because there's a bit missing in the middle. There we go. So that's the beauty of a stamping platform. You can go back rather than using an acrylic block. Okay, so put the cover back on. It's very important that you put the covers back on your ink pads so that they don't dry out. And then I'll give this a clean. Now you'll notice that Stays On discolours your pads, but it won't damage them in any way, or discolours your stamp, but don't worry about that, that's pretty normal. Okay, so now we are left with our 3 stamp outs. Okay, I've just moved forward in the process. As you can see, our first one, we have our well. I've trimmed away from the top of the mountain skyline. Second one, I've gone ahead and I've trimmed away all around, took away the inside of the Wishing Well, and the last one then is just our roof and our stone base of the Wishing Well, just the front part, not the back part. So they're going to be our layers. But what I want to do is I want to decoupage this. So I've got a sheet of watercolor cardstock here, and what I've done is I've trimmed it down to fit on a card blank. I'm marking the outline of the top of the mountains here that are in my first layer of the decoupage. As you can see, I've trimmed away anything from the mountains back, including the little gaps there around the rope for the bucket. So with my base here now, I'm going to be using the Zieler watercolor palette again, and I'm going to put down a color wash. What I want to do is going to do the sky and then some of the greenery. Now, the green area may not be shown the way I have cut my wishing well, but I want to have it there in case I go back and I take more of the background out of the first layer. So it's just to have it there as a good base. So dampening a wide flat watercolor brush, going in with some blue, putting that on the palette, so that's the deeper blue, putting it on the palette there just to wet it, and then bringing in more water to clean the brush, bringing in the lighter tone. So it's going to be a tone that will go from light to dark. Okay, so putting down our lighter blue. Okay, so on our paper here now, I'm just going to tape it down. Taping it just keeps it secure in one place. I'm just using regular masking tape. And the beauty of this is that when you peel it back, you'll have a nice sharp edge to your paint on the bottom and the top. Okay, so going in with the lightest of the colour washes, get a bit more water on that. We'll actually start with the dark. So moving along, we're just following the pencil line. Now the brush is quite wet, and that's deliberate, just so that the colour will spread. Like I said, I'm just following the pencil line. You don't have to be too particular because we're going to be blending this from dark to light. So I'm literally just washing it across the background. And then bringing it up the page, keeping the brush wet. A bit more colour there for the palette. See, just a nice dark tone. Now you can do this on regular cardstock as well. The thing with regular cardstock is it would need to be about 180 GSM, but it will curl as it dries. So taping it down and leaving it taped down while it dries will help with that as well. And don't overwork it because you might end up ripping the paper. So we're starting at the top here with the lighter tone. So I'm going to bring the lighter tone down, and it's going to meet up with the darker tone, and then I can blend the two together, you see. So it's just drawing them in. And because the blue at the bottom, the darker tone will have dried in a bit, wetting the brush just reactivates it. It's the same if you're doing this with your alcohol markers. Putting down the dark tone first, coming in with the lighter tone, and then blending them into each other, going back and forth between the dark and the light until you get a blend that you're happy with. So working it down. Now you can dry this with a heat gun or with a little mini hair dryer. I find getting little mini travel hair dryer is brilliant for this because the heat gun, I feel, burns the paper if you put it there too long. So investing in a little travel hair dryer, and sometimes you get a set with the little travel hair dryer with the little hair straighteners as well. That's brilliant if you have a load of ribbons in your box that you want to use but have creases in them. Heating up the little mini travel curling iron straighteners and run your ribbon through it. Okay, so we're looking good there with the blue, and you can see that it's got a nice wash from the dark into the light. So going down along the horizon line, just making it a little bit darker there, and it has a gorgeous effect when you layer your decoupage on it. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do the same with the green on the bottom. So I'm just going to speed things up a little bit here for you, and you'll be able to see me just follow the same process doing the bottom of the page. now we have our background done. We're going to take a look at what size we're going to make this when we place it onto our card base. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim away the sides of the stamp and make it longer. So I've layered my decoupage layer down on the colour wash background I've just made, and I'm using a ruler. So it's about 20 millimeters from the top. I'm going with the edge of the stamp here and just working down. And you can see those lines. The reason I'm marking through the background and the front at the same time is because I want them to be cut evenly. So measure that down, and then we will just line it up here on the cutting mat, just so I can use the lines of the cutting mat there to keep a straight line. So lining that up, because when this is mounted on a card I do want to leave room for the sentiment as well. So this is going to be more like a decoupage topper than the full card itself. There we go. So what we need to do then is I'm going to trim away any excess paper. So I'm just using the craft knife for this. Just trimming away everything now that I'm not going to use. If you're doing a wider card, maybe an 8x8, you might leave more of the paper to the sides, but I'm going to do a narrow card. I want lots of mats and layers behind this decoupage, so that's why I'm trimming it down. So that's the base gone off it there now. So let's take a look at this. Right, so where I've marked, now let's trim away. Oop, they got that a little bit crooked. I'll check that now in a moment. So again, just following the line that I had marked earlier on, continue down. So steadying the ruler. Like these strips, you could use them for something else, but I'm just going to pop them aside and then take off the other side. Using my cutting mat as a guide here, just to make sure I get the straight line. So if you're investing in a cutting mat, this is actually A2 from Ancio, and it's actually folded in half. It's a great cutting mat. Okay, so this is just kind of lining it up, you know, where the greenery ends and meets the blue that we had done earlier, and then mark along the bottom and then trim that away. That's a good sized piece as well, anyway, that I can use, maybe stamp a sentiment on it as well at another time. So just again using the ruler, I'm just straightening it up here as well. As I said, it looked a little bit crooked, so just playing around with it. I'm going to be layering this onto some black cardstock anyway, so just final check, and then we're going to line it up so I can cut the bottom off, again using the guides of the cutting mat and a craft knife. Perfect. Okay, so we have our base now that we're going to work from, and then when you tap it down on your mat, you see the way they line up. You can't see the green behind, but when I've got the foam pads on and that top layer is brought forward, it's just you will see a little bit of green. So just by eye there, just had a look, and I'm just trimming to make sure that it's straight. Okay, so we have our base layer. And then I'm going to get some of this black cardstock. I'm going to just measure it up against it, trim away what I don't need. So there we have it. The magic of video, I can just fast forward a bit. Right, so we're ready now. We have our bases to start building our layers, but I'm going to have to colour all these decoupage layers, but to just try and blend it a bit, I'm trimming away at the side of the fence there, just because the straight edge doesn't look very natural. So I'm just trimming away some of the waste, carving around the top of the mountains there, just to give it a little bit of a more natural form. So as I said, you can play around with this and remove what you feel is appropriate, but this will just give a look like the fence is standing off from the background. But the green will be coloured the same as I have coloured the wash behind, so it will blend in, and just see me popping out those little bits there. just to give it a little bit more interest, make the fence look a bit more 3D. I could go along around by the bucket and cut out the rest of the fence, but it is quite time consuming for this video, so I'm just going to pop out the end bits. So I think that just looks a little bit more even when it's on the background. Perfect. So I'm happy enough with that base background, and I think what we're going to do is get ready to paint this. So I'm going to speed up the process a little bit in a moment and just bring in all that I need here, my Zealer paint palette, and just going to start with the background first. What I need to do is I'm going to start in the background with the hills, moving to the mountains, then I'll do the greenery, do the fence, and then I will work my way around the stonework. Now I know I'm going to be putting another layer over this of the wishing well, but I'm still going to go ahead with the paint, because some areas, even though you put foam pads in, that you still might see some and they're visible. Okay, so we've done the base of our decoupage. So this is the well background. Just going to put it against our colour wash background there. I think that's looking pretty good. What we need to do now is concentrate on the layers of the wells. So that's our background. I'm just trimmed off just to smooth up any little kind of sharp edges, just give them a little curve around where the greenery is. Now you'll notice the other layer that's above me there for the well itself, there's not as much white cardstock on the base. That I trimmed that too near, but that doesn't matter because the top layer that's going to be put over this piece does have that piece of cardstock. You could go ahead and trim it all off, but I've decided to leave it in place. So we're not going to panic about the this piece at the moment. So what I want to do though is concentrate on the aspects of the roof and of the stone base. So that's extra piece is going to cover that area, and the roof slat's going to cover that. We still have the wood supports that we do need to colour and the bucket. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work on those areas. Just going to clean down the palette. I'm using a wet wipe here. Could go in and you could rinse it off, but just using a wet wipe is sufficient enough just to clean down some of your area to get ready to paint. Okay, so we're going to start then. So just think we'll start with the stonework. On the well, because that extra piece there we have on the right is going to cover the front, we still need to concentrate on the back part of the well that will need it. So this is the grey colour, putting it onto the palette. Going to water it down a little bit just so we can get a colour wash. So here we go. We're just going to sweep it across the stonework pieces. There we go. Sweeping it across, dabbing it in, just covering all the white. We're going to come back and do some shades and tones to this, but it's just to get the grey colour wash down and get a good base. Then we do have some greenery that is on this that we will come back in and do later, so try not to go over the areas where you're going to be covering in the plants. Then we're going to come up to the roof piece, laying down a good foundation. I'm doing this on the cardstock so it'll absorb any moisture because I'm going edge to edge on that. So that's our roof piece and our stonework. So what we need to do now is concentrate on our well. So the part that's going to be exposed is the back of the well there that you can see. So I'm bringing it down. I'm going over the top of where it is going to be covered, just so there's no white pieces shown, and putting down the colour wash there. Bringing it in, concentrating on the area. As you can see, it's a little bit lighter than what we've done here on the base, but when you put one over the other you see that they just marry together, and when there's foam pads on that it just gives it absolutely amazing dimension. Okay, so that's our roof. Give it a little bit more anywhere you see kind of pale areas, but we'll be going back in on that to add a little bit more character to the brickwork. So I'm going to take up the fine point brush now, and we're going to get a little bit of the mid-tone brown. It's a reddish brown, but it's perfect for the woodwork. So putting it on the palette, wetting the brush, bringing it in, diluting it down. I just want a really light shade of this, so where the woodwork is we're just going to come down and paint in all the woodwork, and then we're going to go back and add some shading with a darker brown. Okay, so we've added in some shading and highlights to the stonework on the roof pieces and on the brickwork for the well. And what we're going to do now is concentrate on some of the foliage that is surrounding the base of the well. So I'm going to take the dark green and just go in and dot in the little leaves. So you'll see there's some that is like a trailing ivy that's going up, there's some around the base, and this is on both sides. So we're going to colour it in here on this layer of decoupage, but we're also going to go to the layer behind that as well, because there is some foliage on that that you will see that we have cut away from the very front layer just to create dimension. So just working on the pieces. So what we're going to do then is, you can see here the little fuchsias are hanging out there, so we're just going in, colour them in as well. Now you could go along and put a grey wash on the base of the well here as well if you wanted, but I don't think that it's necessary because this is going to be covered over. So just going in, pick up a little bit more, we'll pick up a little bit of brown there as well, just to add a little bit of shading in, blending it all in as we go, covering up any white areas. A lot's going to be covered when I put over the front layer, but just to have it done. Going to go in now with the magenta colour, picking up a little bit on a fine point brush, not too wet, because I just want to dot in a little bit of colour on these, just to give them a nice floral tint. Working my way down the side and then over to the other. We're nearly ready now to layer up. Just keeping an eye, just check over it again if there's any finished touches that you think that it might need. So dabbing in. The brush is fairly dry, to be honest, it's just picking up the colour. I want a deep colour, not muted down, so that it doesn't blend in with the colours underneath. I want it to stay on top. So taking it there. So this layer will be obviously the front layer, so taking a little bit more time to fill in the areas and add the colour to them. Picking up some more colour and dotting away. Now you could go in if you wanted later on with a fine point pen and add a few more, but I don't want to overdo it now. Just bringing the colour down underneath there as well. Come in now with a bit of a darker green. There is some trailing ivy and there are some tall grass scrubs, so I want to add in a bit of shading along the base of the wishing well stone and bring it down into the grassy area, just to add a little bit of shade and just give it a bit more interest to the area. And we can go back in then, if necessary, with the wet brush and blend it in. So adding our shading there, touching up the little areas, so anywhere that we think there might be a little bit of shade or shadow or an undulation in the ground, we're just highlighting that. Okay, so cleaning the brush, and we're going to take these out of the way now as we prepare to put our decoupage together. So just cleaning up our workstation. The palette there, I'll give that a soak in soap and water later on, that will clean up perfect. And then that's our waste card. So what we're going to do is, so we have our base layers, we have our layer 1, layer 2 and layer 3 then of our decoupage all ready to be assembled. What I've done is I've popped ahead and I've added foam pads to the back of all the pieces. So we're going to start to assemble them now on our colour wash background. So just lining it up just to make sure the sizes are still okay and pressing it down then in place. So that is layer 1 on our base. Now you could do this with any season. I've coloured it, you know, kind of spring tones, but you could make this look autumn, you could make it look wintry, you could add some flower soft and flowers to the front of it to make it 3D. Popping our well layer down now, just making sure the roof is lined up so that the back of the base one isn't shown. And there you go, press that down now in place, and as you can see I trimmed away the end of this. Won't matter, it's still hidden. You could go ahead and trim away the front of the next layers if you wanted, but I've decided not to. Adding our roof layer, oh well, dropping it, making sure it's the right way around, and then pop that over and pressing that down. And then we have our base, so the stone base is going on there, and I've trimmed the cardstock under that, you know, to give another look of dimension. So that is our decoupage topper of the wishing well. As I said, you could play around with this, you could add some, you know, like flower soft or beading or gel drops, anything to add more dimension and interest to it. You could do the bucket again, you could cut that out and add that over, but that is with just 3 layers. That's how you make your topper, and we're all ready now to assemble this into a card. So here we have our topper. I've made a card base for this, and all it is an A4 sheet of cardstock folded in half. The papers that I'm going to use is from this pad from the works called Basic Vintage. Absolutely love this pad. It's very on a Tim Holtz vibe, so if you do see these pads, pick them up. I have got 4 of them. So I've cut the cardstock down, so I've got a green layer and I've got a blue layer to match the tones that are in the background, but I want to just ink up the edges, so I'm using the Tim Holtz ink pads here and my foam pad. So I do prefer to use the rounded blending sponges rather than the rectangular square ones. Literally just going to add ink to the edges of the paper. There is a lot of tones on this paper, but I think when you cut a piece out of a 12 by 12 sheet, you do end up losing some of the shading, so it just finishes it off nice. So as I said, this is the weathered wood pad, and the green pad there is called peeled paint. So working my way around, adding more. I'm not putting up too much, I don't want to overdo it. It's just, I just feel that it finishes off the edges of the paper nicely when it's bedded down on your mats and layers. So this is going to be layered onto some black cardstock. That correlates as well with the black of the stamping and the grey tones of the well. So that's our weathered wood. And then what I'm going to do then is do the same with this sheet here, the green one, so using the peeled paint. So these pads, you can actually buy refills as well for these pads, so it's worth investing in these pads and the inks. So the peeled paint is a bit of a brighter colour, so I think the dark tones of the paper with this light tone works well. It reflects the mountains in the background of our topper and the light greens in the foreground there under the wishing well. So working down the edges there, and you'll see as well I've made a topper. One of the stamps in the set is Get Well Soon, so I've used that to make the topper. And you'll see the pad there is fairly dark. As I said, using the Stays On ink pad as a solvent based ink, it does soak into your stamp, but it won't, once you clean down your stamp and it dries, it won't come out. So you can put white ink, you can put your glue pads over that stamp again and use it, and the black ink is not going to come off onto your project. So I know some people get a fright when they see that and think they've ruined their stamps, but that's not the case at all. It's just what happens with a solvent based or some of the quick dry ink pads, but your stamp is still good to go. Okay, we've inked up this sheet and putting away my messy pad now. So I've trimmed a sheet of black cardstock there is like a 3mm border around this. So using my tape pen, this I love these Xyron tape pens, so you could use liquid glue if you wanted, but just for speed I'm using my tape pen, lining it up and then pressing it down on this. So I wanted, because it's decoupage project, I wanted multi layers on the card as well, just to give it an extra vibe. Beauty of these pens is, tape pens, you have a minute to adjust your paper as well, so if you haven't put it down correct the first time, you can reline it up and then press it down firmly, and that's not going anywhere now, that'll be well set. Same then with the other layer. So what I'm going to do with this layer with the blue and put it on the black, and then my wishing well topper is going to go on top of this. So again, just playing with the colours that are in the background of the painted topper that we've made. There we go, line that up, press that down. That ink is dry now as well, so you're not going to smudge it all over the card. Right, so our cardstock is just an A4 sheet folded in half. You can use card blanks, but I think it's better value if you just buy a pack of A4 cardstock. Some packs come in 50s, 60s and 100s, and you do get a lot of card bases. I don't use a lot of envelopes because a lot of my samples are used for TV, etc., so I don't need the envelope. So for me it's better value just to get the cardstock, because I end up donating boxes and boxes of envelopes. So just checking the orientation of the card now before we layer it up. Okay, so we're going to put our blue and our black layer over this, but I'm not going to put this in the center because I've got a sentiment. I'm going to move it ever so slightly. Right, yeah, we'll just put it down there. So that's our base layer, and now we need to put on our topper. So I'm not putting this in the center, I mean I need to make room for my sentiment. So I've put foam pads on the back, and then we'll fight to get the backing off them. When you cut foam pads down in size, if they're off a strip, it's harder to get the backing paper off them, so have a tweezers or a craft knife to hand to do this. That's 2. 3. I'm putting 4 in just so that there's like 1 on each corner, just to stabilize it and to stop it curling up as well, which can happen sometimes when you've posted something and you don't use enough foam pads. The pressure that's in the rolling machines in the postal service tend to whack things about. So now we're going to finish this off with our topper. So again, this is just stamped on white cardstock and layered up onto a black cardstock. Again, taking off the backing and just placing that there. And that's it. So that is our card there, made using the decoupage technique. You can do the decoupage technique on all the stamp sets. I just thought with the wishing well itself it looked like a fun project to do. Check out the cottage project as well, that's in a frame. You could do decoupage with that. So as I said, these stamps, and we have got MDF elements as well, are available from bertandgertz.co.uk and Hobby Maker. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.